Seats aren't available for non-family, so you'll have to stand. When I went to a restaurant to celebrate my grandson Eric's milestone, I found there wasn't a seat for me in the designated room. As I exchanged glances with the relatives who arrived at the same time, Olivia, the wife of my eldest son Jacob, threw a shocking statement at me. I felt a rush of anger, but a tap on the shoulder from my brother Patrick calmed me down. I said, "I guess we should head home then," and to my surprise, everyone immediately responded with yes to my question. We made a U-turn on the spot. Despite hearing shouts and the loud noise of breaking dishes behind us, I ignored them and headed home, where I immediately took a certain action. My name is Kelly. I'm a 51-year-old office worker for a company that runs multiple restaurants. Although I'm officially listed as a store advisor, I mostly work from home. This is partly because I was born with a handicap in one leg. I don't use a wheelchair, but I can't walk without a cane, making me hesitant to go to crowded downtown areas or use public transportation. Embarrassingly, I don't visit the restaurants my company operates very often. Of course, I know this isn't good, but since losing my husband Jack suddenly to illness 3 years ago, my life has felt empty. Now I live alone in a smaller condo arranged for me by my brother Patrick. I gave the condo where I lived with Jack to my married son and his wife about 2 years ago. Some people ask if I'm lonely, but when weighing the freedom of being alone against the loneliness, the appeal of living freely wins out. Part of this is because my relationship with my son's wife Olivia is terrible. Olivia is 10 years younger than my son Jacob, currently 25. She is stylish, beautiful, and was popular as a college student model while attending a prestigious university. I've heard she appeared on TV several times. She was expected to become a news reporter with the title of Miss University, but she got pregnant with Jacob's child during the summer of her junior year, and they had a shotgun wedding. At first, she took a leave of absence from college with plans to return after giving birth, but she suffered from severe morning sickness and her health got worse. Olivia worried that her beauty would be ruined and threw a tantrum, saying, "I don't want to be seen in public looking like this," and dropped out of college. At the same time, she became irritable over her uncontrollable physical condition and started behaving hysterically towards my son Jacob. "Mom, please, no matter what I do, thinking it's for the best, Olivia just screams and rejects everything. The house is a mess, and it's bad for the baby's prenatal environment. I need your help," begged Jacob. So my husband and I decided to live with our son and his wife in the large condominium we had bought, intending to live there until we died. However, living together turned out to be challenging as Olivia treated me like a servant with her haughty attitude. "Don't dawdle, bring me my smoothie and crackers to bed quickly. Haven't I told you numerous times how sick I feel if I wake up with an empty stomach because of my morning sickness?" she would yell. And when she wasn't yelling about that, she'd scream, "Why are you washing my clothes with your old hag's clothes? No matter how expensive the fabric softener is, it won't keep the old hag smell from transferring to my clothes." Seeing enough, Jack would scold her firmly. Is it's common sense in this house to harass a pregnant woman? But she would just snap back. Even when Jack suggested that Jacob talk to her, Jacob would say, "It's impossible. Nothing makes sense to Olivia right now. I wish you could just deal with it, Mom," laughing it off. As infuriating as it was, the fact that Olivia was pregnant made it so we had no choice but to endure her behavior. Had Jack been his usual self, perhaps he could have taken a firmer stand against Olivia and Jacob. But looking back, Jack's body was probably already being slowly ravaged by disease at that time. Olivia had cluttered Jack's study and living room, which should have been his places of relaxation after hard work, with her beauty devices, leaving no space to rest. Even trying to soak in the large bathtub we had ordered to relieve his fatigue was impossible. "Taking a bath with that old bugger gives me the chills. Just use the shower stall instead," she would say. I faced such verbal abuse, yet Jack would say, Arguing with those two just tires me out more, deciding it was best to endure it himself. Seeing Jack's attitude, Olivia and Jacob, instead of reflecting, escalated their tyrannical behavior even further. As I busily managed the household chores, dragging my ailing leg around, they paid no mind. "I never want to end up like that disgraceful old hag, no matter how old I get," she said, insulting me to the visiting beautician while pointing at me. The beautician was at a loss for words at the sheer nastiness of their comments, but Olivia didn't care. "We really wanted to hire a younger servant, but you know how hard it is to find someone reliable these days, right? So we settled," she declared. Even as these words were spoken, I continued my chores in silence, my leg aching and my heart full of anger towards Olivia and Jacob. As these days went on, Olivia's due date arrived, and she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Holding his first grandson, named Eric, Jack teared up a bit when the tiny hand tightly grasped his finger. Seeing this, I nearly cried myself. The innocent smile of the baby made me want to wash away all resentments and negative feelings. But that thought was short-lived when suddenly I received news that Jack had collapsed at work. Panicked, I rushed to the hospital while trying to contact Jacob on his mobile phone, but it remained unread with no return call. Reluctantly, I asked the company to contact him on his work-issued mobile phone, but that too was in vain with no response. Hoping at least to let Jack see his grandson Eric, I contacted Olivia's mobile phone. I asked her to bring Eric to the hospital. "I'm in the middle of a hair treatment at the salon, so it's impossible," she laughed and refused. "Then I'll come to the salon to pick up Eric myself." Do you really think I'd entrust a baby to an old hag who can barely walk with a cane? With that, she hung up the phone. Still, I didn't give up and kept calling Olivia and Jacob's mobile phones. But in the midst of this, the operating room light went off. Then the doctor came out and informed me that Jack had just passed away. My memories of the time that followed are a complete blank. All I can recall is a hazy scene, as if viewed through frosted glass. After the funeral, which took place amid this haze, I came down with the flu. "Olivia, the baby might catch it, which would be terrible," she exclaimed dramatically and told me to leave the house immediately. Already emotionally damaged by Jack's sudden death and physically weakened by fever and cough, I had no energy left to argue with hysterical Olivia. Barely managing to get dressed, I left the room but collapsed in the elevator hall entrance. Thankfully, the concierge called an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital. According to the doctors, I was on the verge of pneumonia. Later, my brother, his wife, and my nephew heard about my condition and took care of everything. "There's no need to visit the hospital. She's been admitted, she's safe, and it would be terrible if the baby caught something," Jacob and Olivia said, not even bothering to visit. Outraged by their attitude, my nephew and his wife suggested I stay with them for a while instead of returning to the condo, where I'd just be exploited by Olivia again. Returning to the condo would mean resuming a servant-like existence before even regaining my strength. However, staying at my brother Patrick's house, where my sister-in-law's parents lived, was not an option due to infection prevention concerns. My nephew's offer was a welcome one. Deciding to accept their kind offer, I planned to first return to the condo to retrieve Jack's photos and personal items left behind. My nephew's wife, Helen, who was worried about the situation, decided to come with me. When we visited the condominium for the first time in about a month, we found it in a terrible state. What is this mess? Dirty glasses and dishes were piled up, and the garbage disposal was clogged. The living room was no different, with delivery food containers scattered everywhere. The bathrooms and bath were in a dire state as well. I wondered how they could raise a baby in such filth. As Helen and I stood there in disbelief, Olivia, apparently already drunk though it was just past 3:00 p.m., returned with a couple of friends. Noticing us standing in the living room turned into a garbage house, Olivia looked surprised for a moment, but then quickly put on her usual smirking face and said, "So you're finally back." Then get to cleaning this room right away. It got all messy because the old hag slacked off. Helen was furious at this brazen attitude. She quickly approached Olivia and said, "How dare you speak to Jacob's mom like that after all she has done for you? And you just kicked her out the moment she got the flu." But Olivia and her friends just laughed it off. Birds of a feather flock together. Friends of unreasonable people are unsurprisingly unreasonable themselves, they said. Then, as if they had a great idea, they added, "Why don't you just leave for good? This place is going to be Jacob's through inheritance anyway. The old hag can just go back to her parents' house." As Helen grew even angrier, I somehow remained calm. Considering their outrageous behavior so far, it was only a matter of time before Olivia and the others would try to drive me out. There was no reason for me to stay any longer with such unpleasant people, so I called Noah to ask for help, and we managed to move out all my personal belongings that had sentimental value that day. Still, when I looked back at the condominium for the last time, the memory of deciding this house would be where I'd die and Jack's smiling face when we made that decision brushed my heart. I'm sure Jack would understand this decision. I felt certain. After that, I moved into a condominium near my parents' home that Patrick had arranged for me and returned to my job, which had been on hold since before Jack passed away. I also adopted a rescue cat, which I couldn't have before due to Jack's allergy, and started living with it. Though Jacob and I work at the same company and see each other when I go to the office, we hardly ever talk. However, one day I received an unusual message from Jacob. Curious about the sudden contact, I read the message. It was about planning a milestone celebration for Eric at a restaurant this coming weekend. It seems Olivia has invited a large number of guests, including her parents, relatives, and friends. The balance will be off if no one from our side of the family attends, he said, wanting to invite me and the relatives. Why don't you ask Jack's side of the family then? I suggested, but it seems they had already refused. Indeed, Jack's relatives live quite far away, and it's not a distance easily traveled back and forth. Moreover, today is already Friday, and there's hardly any time to prepare to leave the house. It's understandable that they refused. I was about to refuse again when Jacob, sensing my hesitation, said, "I'm sorry for everything that's happened. For Eric's sake, could you consider a request?" Though I was indeed angry with Jacob and Olivia, Eric himself is innocent. Remembering how happy Jack was about Eric's birth, I considered it. I didn't want to spoil the celebration. After hanging up and giving it some thought, I decided to attend and sent Jacob a message to let him know. On the day of the celebration, my brother and his wife, my nephew and his wife, my uncle and aunt, their children, and other relatives gathered in front of the restaurant. Helen said, "I'm here today, not for that couple, but for Kelly." While calming her down, we were led to the room, the largest in the restaurant, with low tables and chairs. This setup would be difficult for me with my mobility issues, so I asked the staff for a chair that was a bit taller. However, Olivia interrupted. "There's no extra seat, so just stand," she said loudly with her arms crossed. Seeing Olivia's smirking face, I felt more dumbfounded than angry, wondering how she could be so mean even now. Then, impulsively, I called out to my relatives, "Shall we go back home then?" Without hesitation, they all responded, yes. The guests on Olivia's side became unsettled by this. Olivia's parents came forward, apologizing to me and my brother and his wife, while hurriedly scolding Olivia. But Olivia, scolded in front of her relatives and acquaintances, became angry and started throwing anything she could get her hands on, like vases, framed pictures, and dishes. Screams, shouts, and the sound of things breaking filled the room, but we left without paying any further attention. Once the relatives and I had left the restaurant, Patrick and I decided to hold a strategy meeting in preparation for what was to come. The company where I, the late Jack, and Jacob worked was originally built by my grandfather. It's a family-owned business where our relatives own more than half of all shares, with my real brother Patrick currently serving as the CEO. Jack was Patrick's close friend since college and joined the company at Patrick's request after graduating. He married a woman who was a clerk there and had a son, Jacob. But after a long illness, his wife passed away when Jacob was in the 8th grade. Patrick, seeing Jack juggling work and home life alone, suggested I marry him, probably concerned about my future due to my disability and lack of social connections. Initially hesitant, I was swayed by Jack's words. "I'm a single father with a child, but I intend to take good care of you. Would you become part of our family?" Jacob, who became my stepson, neither showed hostility nor warmth towards me, his new stepmother. Believing it was unreasonable to expect more from Jacob so soon after losing his mom, I resolved to do my best as a stepmother when Jacob was about to graduate from college. "I want to work at the same company as Dad and Mom," Jacob said, which moved me to tears. However, this peaceful period ended when Jacob had a shotgun wedding with Olivia. After living with Olivia for a while, I couldn't ignore her domineering behavior and decided to have Jacob firmly speak to his wife. I waited for Jacob in the company's underground parking lot, but instead of seeing him alone, I saw Jacob with his arm around a married colleague. Unaware I was standing just a pillar away, they were getting intimately close. The shock was enough, but then Jacob told the woman, "What if someone sees us here? We'd both get fired." She confidently replied, "I won't make such a mistake, and even if my affair gets exposed, the company can't fire me. After all, I'm the president's step-nephew." Unaware of my shocked state, Jacob continued, "My real mom was just a country girl, but my stepmother, even if just in name, is the company's executive vice president and the granddaughter of the founder. So she owns a significant share of the stocks and assets. When she passes, all of that will be mine." Then he drove off with the woman. Overwhelmed by what I had just heard, I returned home, unable to tell Jack. Replaying Jacob's words in my head, I gradually understood why Olivia always spoke so disdainfully of me and why Jacob never reprimanded her. It was as if peeling back layers to reveal the truth. Olivia likely received a similar explanation from the beginning of their marriage. "I'm just a stepmother after all, and they believe I'm merely a tool they can treat however they please until they inherit the estate." Both Jacob and the grandchild yet to be born feel they are entitled to everything. But there's a truth neither Olivia nor Jacob understands. In reality, Jacob and I haven't gone through an adoption process. Legally, Jacob is nothing more than Jack's stepchild with no right to inherit my estate. Needless to say, for Patrick, being the CEO, Jacob is nothing more than a step-nephew, if even that. Recovering from the shock, I immediately consulted with Patrick, Noah, and Helen. Following their advice, I took steps at the City Hall to ensure no unauthorized adoption could take place. Additionally, in case of any eventuality, I arranged to entrust the management of my personal assets to a lawyer, a process that was nearly completed when Jack passed away. Jack's own estate, having been mostly spent on his first wife's illness, consisted of little more than savings and life insurance. I quickly renounced my inheritance. The reason the condominium wasn't discussed during the inheritance talks is because it was never part of the estate to begin with. It's frightening how greed can blind people. Jacob and Olivia, thinking the condominium was Jack's, probably rushed to kick me out after I renounced the inheritance. I backed down quietly, not just because I wasn't in the best of health, but also because I pitied young Eric and didn't want to disrupt his living situation drastically. But this time, I've reached my limit. I originally intended to file for an eviction due to illegal occupancy of the condominium during the milestone celebration, so I promptly began the process with my lawyer. Olivia's parents dragged her to the company to apologize. We were told by Olivia that we shouldn't visit because she needed to get along with the family of the person she married. That the birth and everything would be managed by Jacob's family since an heir is being born, and we took her word for it. We had no idea things had come to this. We're truly sorry." No sooner had they been let into the living room than they apologized over and over, but it was too late for regrets. Hearing the commotion, Jacob also came running. "I had no idea my wife could be this unreasonable. I truly am sorry for what I've done to Mom," he said. But when Olivia started crying, he said to her, "We're getting a divorce. Take the kid and get out of that condominium." The look he gave me, almost growling, truly sent shivers down my spine. Seeing my reaction, Patrick looked at Jacob with a cold gaze and said, "You know that store is part of our company's chain, right? Considering the fuss you've made, you'll both be paying for the damages. As for you, stay home until you receive an official summons from the company." He then firmly kicked everyone out of the reception room. Afterward, Patrick began preparations to fire Jacob, consulting the company's legal advisor right after the milestone celebration incident. He was furious, saying, "Not only is Olivia's disgraceful behavior appalling, but Jacob's negligence in letting her run wild is just as bad. They even destroyed store fixtures and decor. Firing him is only natural, right?" Though he was initially adamant about firing him immediately, the other executives calmed him down, explaining that a disciplinary dismissal made in anger could disadvantage us in a lawsuit. So we turned to a law firm known for its capable lawyers. True to their reputation, they did an excellent job providing indisputable evidence that was more than sufficient to fire Jacob. 2 weeks later, Jacob, temporarily relieved from house arrest, was summoned to the head office meeting room, seemingly prepared for his dismissal. Perhaps he had gathered some inside information. Despite arriving with a lawyer, the sheer number of attendees overwhelmed him. As Patrick, sitting at the center of the board, began, "It goes without saying why we've called you here today. Your dismissal has been decided." Jacob braced himself, clenching his fists. "Mr. Jacob Miller, you are hereby dismissed." Patrick, acting as president, began reading the notice of dismissal to Jacob. His lawyer immediately objected. "My client admits to the troubles with his stepmother Kelly, but insists that connecting this to his dismissal is wrongful termination." A voice rose. Glancing at Jacob beside him, he seemed quite pleased, nodding in agreement. "There's no excuse for my ex-wife's rudeness at the recent milestone celebration, but that was a private matter. Isn't it wrong to fire me over it?" he argued. Then, conspicuously placing a voice recorder on the desk, he said, "I'm also prepared to report this as harassment to the media, if necessary," with a smug face. Hearing this, Patrick and the other executives remained silent. Jacob mistook their silence for victory. "You're aware of the public backlash against companies that violate compliance, right? Are you sure you want to fire me knowing what will happen?" he provoked further. At this point, Jacob's lawyer, not showing the expected signs of disturbance, but rather a hint of a smirk, seemed puzzled. Yet Jacob, ever so confident, failed to notice. Patrick then asked in a deeper voice than usual, "Oh, so you wish to continue working with us? That's a hard pass. However, if you wish for me to leave the company amicably, a certain amount of money as a settlement would be necessary," Jacob said, leaning forward on the desk with a smirk as if to challenge the surrounding executives. But in the next moment, laughter erupted spontaneously from everyone present. Some were even laughing so hard that tears formed at the corners of their eyes. Taken aback by their reaction, Jacob quickly turned red and began cursing foully. His lawyer frantically tried to calm him down. The dismissal notice naturally includes the reasons for dismissal. I'll explain them now, and if you have any objections, we can discuss them afterward, Patrick declared, his presence overpowering Jacob and his lawyer into silence. Both sat down. Then a group in dark suits stepped forward, bowed slightly, and turned on the electronic blackboard in the center of the meeting room. Immediately, the screen displayed screenshots of pages where wine exclusively imported for group participating restaurants was being sold on an online marketplace. Next, the screen showed an enlarged photo of the wine seller's icon. The moment it was displayed, Jacob stood up quickly. "This isn't me," he exclaimed in desperation, turning pale, and for good reason. The photo used for the icon was a cropped selfie of Jacob. The screen neatly displayed the original photos alongside an image match rate of 101% written in red. Facing the lawyer, still unable to grasp the situation, a man from the group of dark suits stepped forward, introducing himself as part of the law firm hired by the company. "Let me explain the reasons for the dismissal notice. The reasons include embezzlement, harassment, undue pressure within the workplace using his executive position, leaking confidential company information, unauthorized absences, tardiness, loafing, and damaging the company's reputation through inappropriate use of a company car," he explained smoothly. He further added that the company's legal and accounting departments had been secretly investigating rumors of the wine, supposed to be sold exclusively in stores, being traded online. In the process, they identified the source account and, collaborating with the police and other relevant parties, discovered that the account was linked to Jacob's online banking account. Additionally, the inventory management department uncovered the existence of double books. Upon questioning, several employees confessed that they had been coerced into participating in the illegal activities by Jacob, who implied they would be fired if they did not comply. As this explanation unfolded, Jacob was sweating profusely, but his complexion turned even paler at the next images displayed. It was a video, seemingly taken secretly with a mobile phone, capturing Jacob as he subjected female interns and temporary staff to sexual harassment and unbearable words. Jacob's lawyer, standing by, couldn't take his eyes off the repeating video, mouth agape. Next shown were images of customer information meant for our company being sold to a rival company, and a USB drive containing original recipes alongside an envelope bearing the name of the rival company's legal counsel. Seeing this, Jacob's face turned from pale to ashen, and his hands trembled on the desk. Our lawyer continued without hesitation, explaining why the USB was transferred from the rival company. Actually, suspicions about the source of this confidential information had arisen even before it was utilized. Upon rechecking the acquisition method, it was found that an employee of the rival company had obtained it from Mr. Jacob Miller in exchange for a significant amount of cash, he explained. The rival company quickly dealt with the involved employee and returned the data to us, along with documents clarifying the factual situation. Jacob's lawyer, taken aback by the continuous revelation of Jacob's misdeeds, listened in stunned silence. However, our lawyer concluded with, "While it might seem superfluous to mention now, all these illegal activities have already led to the filing of criminal complaints. Perhaps instead of discussing settlement money, you should be preparing for a criminal defense," he said with a chilling laugh. Jacob's lawyer turned red-faced. "I've heard nothing of this from my client. I cannot represent him under these circumstances. I resign," he exclaimed, glaring at Jacob before storming out of the room. Left alone, Jacob's initial bravado disappeared, and he slumped in his chair. Before he knew it, the women he had harassed in the video lined up in front of him. "We will be filing for damages as well," they firmly declared. Adding insult to injury, our lawyer continued, "Moreover, it has been confirmed through social media posts that you've been unfaithful with multiple women using company resources, even during work hours, and engaged in inappropriate actions in public. The company will, of course, include these actions in its claims for damages. So please be prepared for that," he stated, speaking pleasantly but with no smile in his eyes. Jacob finally collapsed from his chair, sitting on the floor in defeat. As Patrick and the lawyer had declared, Jacob was swiftly dismissed for misconduct. In the investigation that followed, Jacob, who was interrogated for embezzlement, tried to negotiate a settlement to avoid a prison sentence. However, finding a willing lawyer proved difficult, and he struggled to even pay the retainer fees. Eventually, he managed to cover the lawyer fees and compensation payments using the inheritance from his father, avoiding jail time for embezzlement. Yet, unable to prepare for the compensation claims for leaking confidential information, the emotional damages claimed by the women, and the defamation lawsuits, Jacob found himself buried in debt. Olivia, understandably furious at being quickly discarded by Jacob for his own protection, filed for asset division, damages, and child support. In a defiant stance, Jacob demanded, "Then let's have a DNA test for the child," prioritizing the investigation of paternity over financial concerns. Confidently agreeing, Olivia was shocked when the results showed the child wasn't Jacob's biological offspring. Investigations by a detective hired by Jacob revealed Olivia had multiple partners at the time of their shotgun marriage, one of whom was the biological father, disproving any parental relationship between Jacob and the child. However, legally, Eric was still considered Jacob's child. Knowing he couldn't escape from the obligation of child support, Jacob initiated mediation to confirm the absence of a parental relationship. While a lengthy resolution was expected, the public exposure of Olivia's turbulent private life in court was something her parents wanted to avoid at all costs, leading to an explosive reaction. "Stop bringing shame upon us. Enough with your antics," they demanded, forcing Olivia to withdraw all claims for asset division, damages, and child support. Then Olivia, for reasons known only to her, demanded of Zachary, "You're the father of this child, so you should acknowledge paternity and pay child support." The biological father of her child, Zachary, who was married, refused to acknowledge his responsibility. Zachary was afraid his wife would find out, so he offered to pay some child support. But Olivia was not satisfied. She took the child and confronted Zachary at his home while he was away. "Don't you think it's terrible that your child and mine, sharing the same father, aren't acknowledged and don't receive proper child support?" she boldly stated. Zachary's wife, caught off guard by this revelation and already dissatisfied with her husband, promptly divorced him. She transferred all desirable assets, including a new house, savings, and stocks, into her name before kicking Zachary out with nothing. Initially, Olivia smirked at Zachary's divorce, thinking she could be the next wife. But upon learning he had lost all his assets and was ousted from his father-in-law's company, becoming unemployed, she quickly withdrew. Despite the cause being his own infidelity, Zachary felt his happiness had been destroyed and blamed Olivia. "All of this is her fault," he said. Ever since then, he has been relentlessly pursuing Olivia wherever she hides. Terrified by his obsession, Olivia's parents, to avoid collateral damage, took in only their grandson Eric and disowned Olivia, kicking her out of their home. Left with nowhere to go and no one to turn to, Olivia resorted to night work to support Zachary, now a drunk and unemployed. As I was informed by a detective, I had hired for a follow-up investigation. Meanwhile, Jacob, after all the trials had concluded, was left with a mountain of debt and alimony payments. A claim for me for the restoration costs of the condominium seemed to be the final blow. Trying to make a comeback proved futile as he couldn't find stable employment and resorted to juggling short-term jobs, inevitably falling behind on repayments. There was a time when he possibly couldn't afford a mobile phone and called from a public phone, pleading, "Please, I need help." But the call ended in silence after I remained quiet. Rumors suggest he was last seen being taken to a work site by barely legal debt collectors, but his whereabouts since then remain unknown. As for myself, taking this experience into account, I've become more actively involved in work. I used to think of myself as a decorative executive, a burden to my family, contributing nothing. However, during this ordeal, the company's female employees encouraged me. Even with accessible stores, its true usability can't be known without directly asking the users. "Kelly, you could surely bridge that gap. Have more confidence in yourself." Getting more involved in on-site work, made me realize I had become a pro at finding reasons for why I can't do this or that's impossible. Regretting not realizing this sooner, I'm now 51 with 9 years left until retirement. Rather than mourning the irretrievable past, I'm determined to make the most of these next 9 years. My current goal is to earn an extension of my retirement from Patrick and our relatives, and to report this achievement to Jack, who has passed away.